Well, ladies and gentlemen, welcome to the most interesting and most awaited session, perhaps, uh, for this plenary session 5. Dr. Poonam Khetrapal Singh, Regional Director for Southeast Asia, WHO, Mr. Pankaj Patel, Chairman Zydus Kedila, Dr. Randeep Guleria, who has been the most watched figure in these several months as Director of All India Medical Institute of Science, Sir Rishabh Gulati, Managing Editor, NewsX. Ladies and gentlemen, it's my great pleasure to welcome you to this session, which will be perhaps very exciting because everybody in our country and frankly the globe is trying to judge or guess what is going to happen to the COVID vaccine. And I'm privileged on behalf of IMA that we have a very, very illustrious panel to talk about this and discuss. I'd like to welcome each one of you on the panel, and thank you very much for sparing your time, and all of you, particularly Dr. Guleria, knowing all your great difficulties to spare this time for IMA. It is critical to find a vaccine, is absolutely correct. But I would just like to put forth one or two thoughts. One is finding a vaccine, but ultimately proving how safe it is for human consumption and what is the efficacy. There are stages of clinical trial, but nonetheless. And the second, ladies and gentlemen, if I may just submit, is that while we can find a vaccine, whenever we do, the whole delivery mechanism and inoculating the global population itself is going to be, frankly, in my mind, an even bigger task, if not, it is really the tip of the iceberg. We need to see how we have, whether we have, somebody said the other day, whether we have enough glass in the world to get vials for this, how we are going to distribute this whole thing, the temperatures in which this is going to be, transported. So a whole lot of questions. So finding the race for the vaccine is one part. The second part is how are we going to do this? Governments have also triggered, COVID has also triggered a political debate as to whether globally governments have done enough to try and manage the situation well. And therefore, several countries are trying to see that if they can come up with a vaccine, perhaps that will give their political constituents or their constituents something to say that we have done something. So there are many issues, complicated at best, but I will pause here. And with these words, I would again invite Mr. Rishabh Gulati, the managing editor of NewsX, to take on the session from here. Mr. Gulati.
I appreciate you setting up this conversation very, very precisely and clearly. These are the ambit areas that are of crucial importance. And of course, thanks to the entire organizing team, including the current president and the Secretary General of IMA for having all of us here and putting us together. Let me just invite, I don't think beyond this introduction of our panelists is required. If I could invite all three of you just to have some opening remarks, roughly on the areas that have been circulated for us by Mrs. Singhania. We obviously need to figure out a better timescape, and this is more for our hope and understanding of what we are looking for in the current development process of the vaccine. We need to figure out how it's going to be equitably distributed, for which the COVAX initiative at the WHO is going to be an important part, the logistics of it, and also the entire paradigm now that beyond the economics and politics is also suggesting science first. Dr. Poonam Khetrapal Singh, ma'am, if I could invite you for your opening comments on these.
Thank you very much. You see, you very rightly pointed out that the whole world is looking towards this today. The burning question, of course, is when would we have the COVID-19 vaccine? And quite rightly so, because there's been so much mortality in the world because of it. Over 1 million people have lost their lives. There has been great disruption of economic and social lives of people. And that is why we look towards the vaccine as a mechanism which will not only control COVID 19, but perhaps also lead to recovery. Now, the manufacturing or the production of a vaccine is not simple. It involves many stages, and we know that there is a whole stage wherein the development process looks at different phases of the development of the vaccine, and these are phase 1, 2, and 3, wherein we find that the phase 3 is most critical. At the moment, there are many vaccine candidates, over about 180 vaccine candidates in the world. And out of these, there are about 35 which are already in clinical trials. And out of these 35, we have 7 which are now in phase 3 trials. And these we hear about. This of course, is the Oxford AstraZeneca vaccine based in UK. Then we have the Russian vaccine, Sputnik 5, which has teamed up now with Dr. Reddy. The first one, AstraZeneca, is teamed up with the Serum Institute of India. We have 2 vaccines which are being developed in the US, and Moderna we have, and then we have 3 vaccines which are coming out of China, 2 out of Beijing-based institutions and 1 out of Wuhan. So that is where we are with the development of the vaccine, but everyone is hopeful because we are in stage 3. When the stage 3 of vaccine development ends, and this could take us to the end of the year, there are a lot of other things that we need to look at, which were mentioned by our moderator. We then need to see how these vaccines will be manufactured, because there's a licensing process for it, and then the manufacturing of the vaccine in huge numbers. The need is huge. We are talking of the whole population of the world, and we are talking of 9 billion people, but let us also keep in mind that a lot of these vaccines would need perhaps 2 applications and not 1. And therefore, that's what we need to keep in mind, the numbers that we are looking at. There is, of course, the COVAX facility, which was referred to, and this has been set up by WHO in working together with CEPI, which is the Coalition for Epidemic Preparedness and Initiative. Then there is also Gavi, which is the Global Vaccines Initiative, and WHO. So the 3 organizations are working together to see how we can look at the production, the science of the vaccine, which is CEPI's business. They have divided responsibilities among themselves. WHO is looking at how to allocate the vaccines, the policy of it. How would countries really prioritize who they're going to give the vaccines first to? And then we come to Gavi, which is going to look at the transportation, the distribution of the vaccines, how the vaccines are going to reach those who are in need. This is the whole process that needs to be looked at very carefully. So once the vaccine is produced, it then needs to be manufactured. After the manufacturing, countries have to see who they're going to prioritize. And even though WHO is working on an allocation framework, which it will be finalizing very soon, which is going to be like guidance to countries on how to prioritize those who need the vaccine first. And in this context, all countries are, of course, thinking of those who are most challenged, that is the health workers. They are then thinking of those who have crossed a certain age, those who are more senior in age, and then, of course, people with comorbidities who are more vulnerable. But this broad framework which WHO is working on would then be adapted by each country according to the country's needs. So there would be flexibility in how countries will use this framework. After the whole allocation, prioritization, then we come to the distribution of the vaccines and how these vaccines will really reach countries. Now, there are a whole lot of other issues, and some of them were already mentioned in the opening remarks that were made, that there would be cold chain facilities that would be needed. This is an injectable, so one has to be very careful about how this would be really used. And then training of those who would give these, building capacities in countries to be able to deal with these and then to effectively give them to the people.
Right.
There is always sometimes some resistance to the vaccine. Therefore, communication, community participation becomes extremely important. People have to be prepared to take the vaccine. And I also feel that apart from people, countries have to be prepared on how to get this vaccine and distribute it. Because at the moment, everybody is only thinking about the production of the vaccine.
Correct.
But then when the vaccine arrives in a country, how does the country plan to get this vaccine to its people? In the
Correct.
beginning, of course, there is an understanding in COVAX that 3% of the population of each country is what they are looking for the first round of distribution. And that is not much. So therefore, each country has to plan very carefully on
Right.
who most vulnerable are. Second, each country has to see how it will prepare the system, the immunization system, to be able to give this vaccine to the people.
Right.
And third, each country has to see how it would really communicate this on a larger scale to the people, so there is enough preparedness for it, and people are not living in fear of whether they should take the vaccine or not. So I think these are the kind of issues that need to be addressed. And when we talk about how soon it will be available, the most important issue is safety. So even though it is important to get the vaccine fast, we cannot do that at the cost of the safety of the vaccine. Efficacy issues are, of course, important. Safety and efficacy, but most important is safety. So
Because it will, of course, be, ma'am, far more complicated if we rush it. And I think that science first logic is now coming into its being, because the initial panic reaction, of course, has died down now. At least in this country, there was a lot of conversation that, we might expedite something towards Independence Day. But I think from the highest levels, information has got out that when it's ready, we'll be ready. Let me, with that note, ma'am, we'll come back and, of course, discuss all the points that you raised in just a bit. We have another 45 minutes with us. Dr. Guleria, if I could quickly invite you for your remarks, sir. In terms of the larger perspective of getting ready for a mass immunization program, much like a mass testing program, a mass treatment program, a mass hospitalization program, if you could help us understand.
Thank you very much, and thank you for inviting me. I think I'll just take off from where Dr. Khetrapal left, and that is that for any vaccine, and when we're going to implement it, we have to be very sure as far as safety is concerned. That is the hallmark that we will have to ensure as far as science is concerned. And then would follow the efficacy part. And as has already been mentioned, when we go through vaccine research, it goes through research, development, but the implementation, as you just said, is the most challenging part that we have. How do we deliver so many doses to different parts of the world, especially in those areas where there is resource limitations, and considering the fact that you may actually need 2 doses, you may need a booster dose of this vaccine, and therefore how do you actually give 2 doses in a situation where there is resource containment? But I think the important issue is that we are having multiple vaccines, and maybe one will not be enough, and we will have to look at multiple candidates which can be used as far as the global community is concerned. So then how do we decide which vaccine candidate is ideal for which part of the world or which population? And here I'd like to bring in the fact that with vaccine may not be able to really, at times, be able to provide the solution that we're looking for. The solution that we're looking for are 2. One is protection of individuals, but also to get the economy back in, and get us back to normal. Now, the vaccine can have 2 things. One is it can give sterilizing immunity, that if you are given a vaccine, you will not get the infection, and therefore you are protected completely. But we have vaccines which may actually give you immunity, but which may not be total. In other words, you will get the infection, but you'll get a mild infection. You will not go on to a severe infection because you have some immunity as far as the vaccine is concerned. And when you are exposed to COVID-19, you get a mild infection. Now, this may actually have another implication. You get a mild infection, but you are still infectious. You can still spread the infection in the community and to the more vulnerable people or the more susceptible people. And that will not actually put a stop to the pandemic completely. We may still have ongoing cases. And that will mean that you will not get what we call herd immunity, and you will need to actually vaccinate a much larger population that you had thought of in the beginning. So I think my take is that we will need to really look at all of these things and look at the science behind it, because this will decide our vaccine strategy when it comes to vaccinating a large part of the population, especially in countries like India, where you will have to look at the cold chain, you will have to look at multiple doses, you will have to look at how do you give the booster dose, and how are you able to make sure that safety is there even in certain ethnic groups or in certain other groups which may have a higher chance of developing vaccine-related side effects. So this is going to be a huge challenge, and therefore we've been able to do the early part as far as vaccine is concerned, from phase 1, phase 2 to now some vaccines going into phase 3 trial. But once these phase 3 trials have been done and we come to the implementation part, I think we are going to have a huge challenge, and we should utilize this current time talking to all stakeholders into how do we develop an aggressive and good strategy for implementation when we have to do it. We can't really waste time. We have to work in parallel and sort of do all of this, whether it's production of vials, whether it's production of making sure the cold chain is in place, whether it's production, whether it's training all the healthcare workers, even in rural India, how to vaccinate and how to give the vaccine and how to monitor for side effects. This is something we need to do today rather than tomorrow, because as soon as the vaccine comes out, all of this has to be done ASAP. Otherwise, we will be wasting a lot of crucial time and lives will be lost. I think this is the important message that I would like to give. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much, sir. Come back to you in just a minute. Let me invite Mr. Pankaj Patel. For people watching this telecast, Mr. Patel runs one of India's biggest pharma biomedical companies, specialization in cancer and many other life-saving treatments. Pankaj, help us understand the logistical scale perspective. And the one important dynamic that is going to be extremely important is the public-private partnership here. If you could set that up with your opening remarks.
Yeah, thank you, Rishabh. And I think I agree with what Poonamji and Dr. Guleria said. I think vaccine alone, in my opinion, is not the solution to the problem. We need vaccine, and also we need more treatment protocols to make sure that we are able to take care of people. Because I think the way the vaccine trials are designed currently globally, there is not going to be a possibility of immunity in 100% of the people. And that's why it is going to be very important that if the immunity is not going to develop in 100% of the people, we would need vaccine. But of course, we will also need to keep on working on treatment part of it. The other part is that the requirement of the vaccine doses are going to be very high. Given that almost all vaccines are going to work at least 2 doses, and if you look at India's population, and even if you decide to immunize 50% of people, we would need 130 crore plus doses. And that's not the capacity anybody has it. And even if the people have capacity to produce, it cannot happen in one day, but it will be happening over a long period. Second challenge we would have is that how long the immunity will last with this vaccine. And if the vaccine is going to give a long-term immunity, wonderful. But if it is a short-term immunity, then we'll have to keep on immunizing people again and again, which is going to be even another challenge. So today, we would need definitely vaccine to help to control this spread of this disease, but vaccine alone is not going to be the other efforts which is being put in terms of social distancing, wearing masks, isolating people, testing people. All those things will continue to remain important. So people should understand vaccine is important part of the overall game plan to control this problem. But I don't think we should build think like, oh, vaccine has come, now we are free to move around. It's not going to happen. What is going to be important that if we have to produce such a large quantity that we don't know who is going to buy it. These vaccines are coming from a very difficult platforms. And as a result, the cost of the vaccine is going to be significantly high compared to many other vaccines. So I think there is going to be a requirement to think about how are we going to fund this. And this is going to be important. Second is if India has to produce, for a moment, let us assume that India has to produce and deliver 130 crore dose to Indian people in 1 year time. My opinion, India would need to invest in manufacturing facility to the extent of roughly 3 to 5,000 crore rupees to create additional capacity to make it happen. So it's not going to be that easy as we are thinking. I don't think currently it's too early and too premature unless we have vaccines which has successfully done phase 3 trial and are approved. But I think that's going to be another challenge. And there it is going to be very important that government, private sector, philanthropic group, everybody should come together to make this happen. This is a global problem, but this is a problem for everyone. It doesn't spare anybody. That's why collectively working is going to be very important as we move forward. Rishabh, you are on mute. You are mute.
We are, of course, questions also coming in from people, but give me a perspective change for people who are listening into this conversation. Dr. Khetrapal Singh, as an example of a case study, explain to us the scale that we're talking about, because India is the biggest manufacturer of global vaccines. Is there a parallel that can be drawn of the polio vaccination program, for example, immunization program, where we do distribute around 200 million doses? Is that a good example of an infrastructure that needs to be created?
I think yes, that is something that we can look at, because India is known to be the pharmacy of the world, and we produce more vaccines than any other country in the world. And therefore, we have that expertise and we have that knowledge. Our healthcare workers are trained to do that. This may need a different kind of skill set and a different kind of training, but the basics are there. Therefore, we talk of the scale. Yes, the scale that is needed is huge, but that is the scale which is needed for polio also. And we do know.
Dr. Khetrapal, so what is the lesson? I mean, if the polio and perhaps now the testing programs that have scaled up dramatically from almost nothing to thousands per day, are those examples of scale, or are those going to be fractional to what is going to be required for a vaccine program?
Oh, yes, those are very good examples of scale, because we saw it going up dramatically. And I am of the view that, yes, that will also happen in the manufacturing of vaccines, because already we are hearing. I had a meeting where we had various vaccine manufacturers present, and there was commitment from one of them, the Serum Institute of India, that yes, they have the capacity to scale up and to give India the vaccine that it needs. Whether it will be to the amount that is needed is yet a big question mark, but a huge amount would be produced.
Okay, how quickly, ma'am, how efficacious is to do pre-production? A lot of people, including Serum Institute, have gone into pre-production. Is that a good model, encouraging model?
Well, you see, they are taking the risk, because we still have to get the results of phase 3 trials. And if they have gone into it, we do know about it. But there are a lot of steps being taken simultaneously. Like we find that phase 2-3 trials are being done simultaneously. When we are talking of a vaccine to be produced in 12 to 18 months, when it normally takes 5 to 15 years, there are going to be these kind of steps. And yes, we have heard of this. But of course, the risk is of those who are manufacturing this vaccine, because it's their profitability issue. We yet have to see what the result of the phase 3 trials are, and we yet have to analyze that data.
One quick question before I get into Dr. Guleria, and we take some questions that are coming in from people watching as well. Dr. Guleria, in a fundamental world, India is going to have the very difficult moral question of having to provide 130 crore potential doses right here, and also serving as a vaccine manufacturer for the rest of the world. The Prime Minister has spoken about this. We had this conversation, although it was a different kind of conversation when the exports of HCQ came up. How do we answer this question?
So this is going to be a big challenge as far as India is concerned of how do we do vaccine equity, both for our own country and at a global level. And I think this is something that has been said by the Honorable Prime Minister also, that there should be no vaccine nationalism. And we should try and see how we can distribute the vaccine to those who need it the most and how it can help in actually bringing down mortality and also containing the pandemic. So that has to be worked at. We have to have a distribution policy for our own country, which should obviously be a priority, but also see that we can supply vaccines to other countries which need it and don't have the capacity to be able to produce their own vaccine.
Okay. When you say distribution policy, sir, Dr. Khetrapal Singh pointed out, a 3% logic in the first phase is being talked about. 3% is a large number even in India, but percentage terms, it means nothing. Do we now pre-order covering for those 3%? Do we look at local domestic manufacturers covering for that 3%? Do we now have to start talking in real numbers?
I think so. We have to start talking in real numbers because, like I said in the beginning, that we need to start doing the groundwork right now in terms of manufacturing. As was mentioned, it's a big risk, but at the same time, we need to take that risk in terms of the manufacturing and distribution. I'm aware that there is a group in the Government of India that is working on this to look at how do we do the distribution in terms of equity, in terms of manufacturing, and how do we develop a strategy so that the vaccine is able to reach to everyone in the country, both in urban and rural part of India.
Okay. It will be very difficult because everybody would want it. And like any scarce resource, it becomes a huge issue of how to prioritize. How much clarity, Dr. Guleria, do we need to have a consensus before it arrives? Because we don't want to be in a situation where state by state, city by city, municipality by municipality, region by region, we are in a competition.
So I think this has to be done by an expert group. This was something that was even looked at when we had the H1N1 pandemic. Remember, at that point in time also, there was a whole issue of the vaccine and there was a priority list. Even the WHO had created a priority list of who should be vaccinated first, looking at two things. One was who is at the highest risk of getting the infection and who are the group that can have more severe disease in terms of mortality. Based on that, you will have to make a priority list. And then depending on the availability of the number of vaccine doses, go down that priority list and try and cover as many groups as you can. India is a huge country and a number of people with comorbidities is going to be huge. So we will have to do an estimate of the number that we need and the available doses and then try and develop a strategy of how do we deliver it to all those who need it. It's going to be an exercise that we need to do now rather than do that later on.
Yes, and I think consensus on that pre-facto would be much more useful because we don't want to get into highly sensitive life or death controversies later on. Let's quickly get Mr. Patel in, then let's take some questions that are coming in from people watching us on this. Mr. Patel, help us prioritize, sir. There is a logic of distribution, but then there is the logistics of distribution. We have good examples. Maybe the testing is a good example where we are doing lakhs of testing per day. It's gone into 11, 12, 15 lakh tests that are happening in the country. We have a polio vaccine example in this country. But in the sheer logistics of having an injectable vaccine, which will probably have to be held in sub-zero temperatures, what do we need to prioritize from glass vials to syringes? What do we need to do, sir?
So I think we need to have a very strong distribution system. Many of the vaccines which are being developed currently are talking about a very low temperature of almost minus 80 degree. Some vaccines are being talked about to be stored between 2 to 8 degree. So I think it's going to be very important that we need to be ready with the logistics. As far as 2 to 8 degrees concerned, India has reasonable capability of storing and distributing products at 2 to 8 degree. And as far as what I understand, most of the vaccine which is currently being evaluated in India are basically to be stored at 2 to 8 degree, for which some reasonable facilities available. When it goes to the remotest area, we would need to really figure out how to make sure that also they get it. Most of these vaccines, though they are required to be stored at 2 to 8 degree, for a short exposure of a higher temperature, the efficacy doesn't go down. That has been always seen, and generally a manufacturer would test the vaccine for a short exposure to make sure that they are safe, they remain safe and efficacious, even accident exposure. So, as long as the vaccine is going to be stored at 2 to 8 degree and to be distributed within India, we are very much there.
Okay.
Vaccine will be that this kind of vaccine, of course, will be given in multiple doses. So there is a challenge, of course, is with respect to number of glass vials which will need and number of syringes which will need. I do not see challenge with the syringe supply. I would definitely see a challenge with respect to the glass vial supply.
Okay, I'm going to come back and take on this because people are writing questions on this regard as well. So I'm going to come and take up this point in just a second. But in terms of the public-private partnership, which is going to be, I think, at a historic global level, we can't think of single example that would match the scale. How do we balance the risk on this? Do we have to have a public funding program, a public fund that needs to be created? Because in the end, this is going to be an important question to resolve as well, Mr. Patel. How do we fund it, sir?
Yeah, so I think that is a major challenge, because if you look at the Indian developed vaccines, the phase 2 and 3 clinical trial cost is roughly 150 crore rupees. That's only the clinical trial cost. I'm not talking about manufacturing cost or development cost or setting up manufacturing facility for a large scale. So there is a huge risk involved in terms of doing phase 2, phase 3 study. And on top of it, there is also need to gear up for manufacturing of vaccine in large quantity, for which we would definitely, everybody would need additional investment, because technologies here are different than what the classical vaccines India has been producing up till now. So there would be need to basically, they are mostly using a recombinant technology, most of the vaccine, and as a result, a different kind of vaccine manufacturing facility has to be created. India has capability to scale up and make it happen. But the question is, there will be huge investment required. And top of it, if you manufacture that vaccine on risk, which few of us are doing, we also are aware that there is a risk that if the vaccine doesn't give the efficacy, that would be lost. So I think there is a need to be to figure out to encourage people to take larger risk and move forward, and more public-private funding.
If there was a safety net available to manufacturers, including big majors like yourself, that would help you take more risk so that we can get off to a running start. Okay, there are lots of questions pouring in. Let me try to take up as many as possible. Dr. Anil is writing in, and let Dr. Guleria take this. His question is, so will the vaccine in development cut transmission risk in addition to disease risk? You mentioned this a short while ago, transmission risk versus disease risk.
So I mentioned this sometime back that we are looking at two strategies. Where does the vaccine give sterilizing immunity? And if it does give sterilizing immunity, then it will cut down the transmission risk also. But if it doesn't give sterilizing immunity and it gives that you get infected but you have a mild illness, that means if you get a mild illness and you may still be infectious and you may still be having the ability to transmit the disease. And this has implications when you're looking at opening up and allowing coming back to normal. And that's why, as was mentioned by Pankaj Patel ji, that we need to look at other things also. It's not the vaccine is the magic bullet. We will still need to look at better treatment strategies. We will also need to look at other strategies like still wearing a mask, physical distancing. But you have now multiple vaccine candidates which have gone into phase 3.
Okay, Dr. Guleria, just for the sake of people watching, we have talked so much on the vaccines with the 180 odd vaccine candidates. We haven't made too much progress in treatment per se. Is there discordance in this? Because I think after remdesivir and FaviFlu, which you have to take 18 pills in a get-go, so it's a strong dose that you have to take. Nothing has happened after that. Why is that?
So I think we are still in this. It's a novel virus which is just maybe 7 or 8 months old, and currently all the drugs that we're using are actually repurposed drugs. These are drugs which were already there in the market and were not specifically for COVID-19. These were drugs which were for other. For example, remdesivir is a drug which was developed for Ebola. Favipiravir is a drug which was developed for influenza. It's a drug which was actually approved in Japan for H1N1. So we are looking at what we call repurposed drugs. It takes, as it takes a long time to develop a vaccine, it also takes a significant long time to develop an efficient antiviral drug which may be effective as far as.
Quickly on this thought, but mortality rates have fallen. Is that because we, at least even if we don't have a drug, in terms of treatment protocols, we have improved? That's what's happened?
Yes, I would say that if you look at how things have evolved as far as treatment is concerned, our treatment strategy has changed dramatically. 6 months ago, we were looking at different drugs. We were looking at anti-HIV drugs. We are not looking at that right now. We know that there is a lot of things that this virus causes, like a hypercoagulable state, and we give anticoagulants. We know that steroids are effective, and we know when to give anti-IL-6 drugs. So our treatment strategy has definitely improved, and that is actually decreasing the mortality.
Okay, not and moving on to like steroid and stuff like that. Okay, another question coming in, and Dr. Khetrapal Singh, take this, ma'am. One of our viewers is asking, are countries going to look beyond trade relations with other countries? You know, you have trade agreements and free trade agreements. Is this a factor at all, ma'am, in vaccine distribution? Because not all countries get along in economic terms or political terms or geopolitical terms.
Well, it hasn't been discussed openly yet, but yes, it could play a role. We do know as the vaccine is being produced, there are a lot of bilateral agreements going on. And there are agreements which countries are making with each other, of course, with countries where they are more comfortable politically, let's put it like that, to get the vaccine from them. For example, in my own region, I'm aware there's an MOU between Bangladesh and China and another country of my region, Indonesia and China, to pick up their vaccines. So there are these kind of bilateral agreements which are in progress. And it could affect, of course, other issues related to trade. We still have to see how it pans out. At the moment, what WHO is really talking about is the COVAX facility, because if there are countries, there are about 80 countries which are already members of COVAX, where they are contributing for the vaccine. So they're making contributions there. And in my region, there's Thailand. But there are also 92 countries which Gavi has identified, which are now going to be the recipient countries.
Where does India stand in all of this, ma'am? Because India is participating in some of these mechanisms.
India has already been identified by Gavi as a recipient of the advanced market commitment, which means that they would get vaccine at a cheaper rate than those who have opted in the first category.
Okay. All right. We have another question. What should be the government's roadmap? Pankaj, why don't you help us take this? Then I'll open Dr. Guleria on this question also. What should be the roadmap, sir? Obviously, first we need to identify through consensus who are the people that need to get it first. Then we need to identify where the distribution and how it's going to happen. How do we now publish this roadmap, sir?
So I think, Rishabh, we need to basically focus on advanced planning for vaccine availability. And that's why we need to really figure out what exactly the quantity we now need, who will be able to supply those vaccines, what kind of facility to be created to make sure that happen. It could be one of the Indian vaccine. It could be also vaccine which is developed elsewhere and manufactured in India. But it's going to be important that we do that. Apart from that, of course, there has to be encouragement to doing some kind of research in the area of finding treatment, because I believe there are a number of targets currently being seen which can be very useful. For example, inflammasome is one target on which we can work on it. We can work on HIP inhibitors. There is also an interesting thing which we have now found in the virus structure, that there is a PL-Pro and 3CL-Pro targets in that, which could also help us to develop a kind of a treatment for that. There could be also biological solutions of creating monoclonal cocktails, which could be actually a cure. And I think that is what ultimately also...
Will it make a dramatic
government has to take a comprehensive view.
So will it make, in your opinion, make a dramatic difference between where the vaccines are first developed? In terms of, as a country, do all of us need our own vaccine?
Well, I think it's a global crisis. If we get our own vaccine, wonderful, but we should be prepared for anything. Wherever is the good quality vaccine, good efficacious vaccine developed, we should have it in India. That's the way I would.
Okay, let me take Dr. Guleria quickly onto this. There's another question after that. Dr. Guleria, some major countries, including the United States, for example, which has been reticent on the WHO, COVAX approach, have already pre-placed orders for millions of doses covering roughly their population several times over. Do we need to follow a similar kind of approach where we pre-place orders as a government, or do we simply look at manufacturing capacity?
So I think, as has already been mentioned, we should not go into vaccine nationalism, because we need to look at it at a global platform. At the same time, we have to see how best we can provide vaccine for our own citizens. And I think, as has been said, as in terms of manufacturing, India is the hub in terms of vaccine manufacturing. And we need to see how we can ramp up capacity. There has to be a lot of public-private partnership. We have to start talking to industry, support the industry in ways that we can ramp up our facility. It doesn't matter who gets the vaccine. India will be manufacturing a large part of that vaccine, and we should be able to develop a strategy of how do we distribuute it with good equity, both at a global level and at a national level.
In the circumstances
on a platform.
And there are several vaccines which are, of course, using several methodologies to tackle the virus. Is there a risk? What if a person says, I want to get all 4 vaccines that are available? Do we get into these kind of problems later?
So there is going to be a lot of challenges as far as the multiple vaccines are concerned. Not only person deciding, governments are deciding which vaccine would be more useful in an ethnic population. And like I said, we don't have a head-to-head comparison between different vaccines. So how we don't really know which vaccine will provide a long-lasting immunity, which will provide immunity for a shorter duration. Will giving a combination of vaccines be more effective in the long run? If you were to give one vaccine and give
a room for error here, sir? For example, let's say a vaccine A comes first, and our priority is, let's say, the 3 million healthcare workers. We immediately want to roll it out, and we don't roll it out. If 2 months later or 3 months later a more efficacious vaccine comes out, can those same healthcare workers receive a second dose, or is there a risk involved?
So again, we need to be aware of the fact that there can be some what we call vaccine enhanced response that can lead to a more severe disease, and therefore all of this needs to be worked out when we start giving different types of vaccine to the same individuals. So we've seen that which happened with let's say the dengue vaccine, where people who had previous infection in dengue, once they were vaccinated, actually had a more severe response. So this is a learning curve. When we will learn as we vaccinate, and we have to be prepared for that. And we will develop a strategy which will have to be fine-tuned in terms of different vaccines and how we distribute them.
One of our viewers is writing in, do we have any updates on Covaxin? I believe it's in stage 2, stage 3 right now.
Correct. So that is actually going on from phase 2 to phase 3, and the Serum Institute vaccine is actually going into phase 3. The Bharat Biotech and the Zydus vaccine are actually in phase 2 and will in a very short time move into phase 3. So I think there is a good development as far as India is concerned. And as was mentioned in the beginning, that the Russian vaccine Sputnik 5 is also now going into phase 3 trials as far as India is concerned. So a lot of
things are going to be happening here in India. And of course, can I quickly get in Dr. Khetripal Singh? And ma'am, there's a gentleman called MS Kumar. He wants to know, can the pre-production risk be shared between public and private sectors? Can the mechanism be developed? Would it be ideal?
Well, it depends now on the government and various factors that would government like to share that. As far as I know, and as far as I've heard from the one manufacturer which is going in for large-scale manufacturing of vaccine, very confident that it would work. I don't think they're even looking for a public partnership there, because the confidence they have that this vaccine will work is immense. Could be a good mechanism if one had to move nationally on it. But if you look at COVAX really is a public-private partnership in a way, because there we have various countries of the world who are contributing, and we have like 2 public-private partnership organizations which are part of COVAX. CEPI is a public-private partnership organization, and so is Gavi. WHO
Okay.
is Gavi. So therefore, I think it could be a good way of moving forward.
I think that answers the question the public-private partnership is already having. Whether governments are placing orders, funding research, or setting up grants, that is also a public-private partnership of a certain definition, and of course is going to continue. Okay. Efficacy of lockdowns. Dr. Ketripal Singh, one of our viewers wants to know, how do we evaluate? India had one of the most stringent global lockdowns, yet we have a high number of daily cases. I know we have a high population rate as well. How do we evaluate? What is the lesson learned? Do lockdowns work, help, don't work?
Well, you see, there has to be a balance everywhere. And as far as WHO is concerned and our guidelines are concerned, we do talk of lockdowns being giving some space for preparation. And that is what India did when they brought a lockdown, and they did bring it very early. It was very aggressive lockdown. And it did give them breathing time to ramp up their facilities, to ramp up not only the facilities where people in the hospital beds and such like, but also testing facilities. So it did help in a way, but of course there is a fine line and a balance one has to keep, because the economic fallout is there, as India is now also realizing now. But there are countries in the world which have not had lockdowns and who we initially thought were very successful. I'd like to mention Korea there and Sweden there. But gradually, they realized that lockdowns were necessary. So when the next wave came, there were lockdowns there. I think it depends on each country to really see how they would balance it out. What is the period of lockdown? How aggressive has the lockdown to be?
I think that's a whole area of study which needs to be reevaluated since the day also of the bubonic plague and the concept of quarantines. Demographics, Dr. Guleria, different demographics, both in terms of age, in terms of ethnicity, do these make a difference in vaccine choices, preparation, etc.?
So I think this is something which we need to keep in mind, especially age, because as we know, the elderly have what we call immunosense, that is, their immune system is not that responsive, and in various vaccines it's been shown that sometimes you don't get that much of immunity in the older age group, and you may need to give a higher dose or give a booster for the older age group. So age is one factor, and that's why, like when we were talking about the vaccine, in phase 3 studies or subsequent studies, you will have to see both for ethnic variation, for the variation in people whose immunity is low because of comorbidities, and the elderly in terms of efficacy. So all of these have to be factored in.
Based on ethnic variation, sir, because if let's say I'm Asian, therefore my immunity system is going to be different than let's say if I'm Anglo-Saxon Caucasian. Does that make a difference?
So it's unlikely that it will make a difference in terms of efficacy, but we need to look at safety, because it's been shown that in certain vaccines, in certain ethnic races, you may have a higher chance because of genetic variation of some degree of susceptibility. Okay. And that is why one has to be a little bit careful.
The fact that is very useful. That because we'll know that it's been doubly checked in Indian population just in case there's a variation we were not aware of. Okay. Can India use Sputnik in clusters which are reporting maximum cases per day? And Sputnik, of course, is the current vaccine which the Russians, of course, say is ready. Pankaj Patel, would it be useful, sir, to have a cluster-based approach as much as a demographic, comorbid healthcare approach? Should we continue with that approach that look, a certain area or a district or a cluster has a large number of cases, let's deploy vaccine there first?
So I think that will be part of the strategy. So selecting the right population to vaccinate, and there also some of the areas where there is a very large outbreak of disease, one could always look at immunizing on a larger scale. But all these will be decided based on the kind of vaccine requirement based on the disease prevalence in different areas. However, I think what currently thinking is correct, that we should look at the high-risk population first.
Okay.
Before
so
we move to
high-risk
other
population definition also will be important. Morbidities, and of course the chances of getting the disease and because of the professional profile are obviously one descriptors. Geographic and regional descriptors can be another one. If an area has not had cases in the past 6 months, Do you want to go there first or not go there first? Are going to be interesting conversations. We have just under 10 minutes left. I'm going to take a couple of quick questions and give our guests a chance to give their closing comments. Stem cells has been asked as a question. Dr. Guleria, do stem cells research, is there any part of discussion within the science of this?
Yes, there is research going on as far as stem cell therapy is concerned. There is a large group in Israel which is working on this, and it's being offered in certain centers, even abroad. But still, it's a research that is being done. I won't say that it's something which has reached a stage that we can say it's a standard treatment protocol. But there are centers which are looking at stem cell both in India.
Yes, there is at least a scientific research. It might not be useful right now. We don't know, but there is science happening in that area. Okay, diabetes, Dr. Guleria, is being specifically asked. What is the issue or complication that diabetes could further have in an immunization program or in the disease itself?
So currently, I don't think if you have well-controlled blood sugars, it should not be a problem. And I don't think diabetes would be something which will create a big issue in terms of the vaccine efficacy. Therefore, in my mind, it should not be a big problem. We have a huge number of patients who have diabetes in our country. India is known as the diabetic capital of the world. But I don't think, as of now, there is data to suggest that diabetics will have less immune response as compared to non-diabetics.
Okay, thank you. There's another question. Sudhanshu Saurav is asking, class divide in this. Pankaj Patel, is there any modicum of risk that where you are and what you can afford will make an impact on how you're immunized?
No, I don't think that is going to be the thing. Only question is that if of course there is no free vaccination available, then obviously people who have money and approach to that would have vaccine. Others may not have it, but I don't see that situation to arise because I think everybody is concerned about it and people want to work together to make it happen. So I don't think that will happen.
Okay, let's say Pankaj Patel, in a hypothetical model, there are several vaccines eventually in 3, 4 months, 6 months that are available. Some might be more expensive because they employ a different technique and may have different variations in terms of how much immunity they give. Some might be cheaper, easier to manufacture, but only give temporary or limited immunity. How do we make those judgment calls?
Currently, we don't know that, but of course, we will make that judgment call as when it comes. Question is, there is going to be a trade-off between the safety, efficacy, and price. And I think very importantly, we're going to look at price as the last. We're going to look at safety first, then we're going to look at efficacy, and then we're going to look at price. And I think that's the way the model has to be developed to make thing happen.
Okay, let's 5 minutes left. Let's progress towards the end of this conversation in reverse order. Pankaj ji, if you could just bullet point for us the best way possible of the preparation for the vaccine when it comes. We already have our vaccines in trial. Global vaccine programs are already happening, so we don't need to start more R&D on vaccines. Maybe more R&D on treatment has to happen. You mentioned that there are other indicators which will have to continue, including a social distancing or mask wearing or other things will have to continue for a so far indefinite period. But what would be your priority list for setting up the immunization program?
I will now talk more from my own knowledge rather than talking at the national level. So as a company, we are concerned about this whole problem. And as a result, our vaccine, which is currently in phase 2, will get data by end of November. And we are expecting that if the data is acceptable, then we would move into phase 3 in the month of December. We parallelly set up a facility to produce 100 million doses at this moment for supply to India. And we are doing at our own risk. And we would be also producing at risk vaccine for that. We also are doing 6 different programs in the area of small molecule and biologics to basically look at kind of a cure possibilities. So some of them are in clinical studies, but they are repurposing drugs. But we also have some novel approaches for which we are currently doing it, and we hope that by next year we should be moving into clinic in 1 or 2 of these targets. The third thing which we are trying to do is basically develop parallelly a new vaccine which might give a long-term immunity, and that's we call it ZyCoV-M, which is a measles virus vector vaccine. We have now successfully developed a measles virus containing the COVID vector into it, the S protein vector into that, and that vaccine currently are undergoing preclinical study. Hopefully, we could have also an option available in future, which might create a kind of engine in the body to produce continuous immunity against COVID. So this is what we are doing as an organization. I think more people have to keep on doing this. I believe in India, number of companies and number of government institutions are seized with this problem. So is globally. And I think though there is a problem, I'm sure over a period of time, the world will find a solution.
Well, please thank your entire team and your researchers, your scientists, and your entire people working in a company for the efforts they're putting. And please, we look forward to whatever support the rest of us can offer as well. Dr. Randeep Guleria, sir, looking ahead, sir.
So I think, as has been already mentioned, we need to look at 2 or 3 things. One is, how do we decrease the number of cases? And therefore, we need to continue to have what we call non-pharmacological measures in place. We've reached a stage where there's a little bit of COVID behavior fatigue, and we need to really work on trying to correct that, because as the lockdown has sort of opened up and people have sort of been very good in the early part of the lockdown, all that behavior has changed, and this has actually promoted or led to the increasing number of cases. And we also need to look at a strategy where we can quickly have a vaccine in place. But as has been mentioned, the most important thing is the safety of the vaccine. If the vaccine is not safe, or it creates an impression among the general public that this is something which is not safe, it will really have a huge effect on the vaccine implementation program. So we must not really compromise on safety. The efficacy is which comes later on. But even if the efficacy is something that is not, say, 70 to 80%, even around 50 to 60%, it should be acceptable. But as long as we are really sure as far as the safety is concerned. And I think it has to be a multi-pronged approach. We can't really just look at vaccine as the magic bullet. We have to look at multiple strategies, treatment, non-pharmacological, and vaccine all have to really come together.
Okay. Safety first, efficacy next, and cost is a distant last. And I think there's consensus on that's not the issue right now. Dr. Khetrapal Singh, ma'am, what would you hope that as a public that forms administrative structures, societal structures, and private sector structures, that we now quickly get into place so that we have a consensus and a plan? So when the vaccine does come, or different vaccines come, that we know what we are doing. We are not having complicated debates on prioritization at that point of time.
I think what we need to do, and what countries really need to do, is to start planning. That is extremely important, and that was mentioned, that normally this planning is not done. This is the time to plan. The vaccine will come at some point. Now, when it will come, of course, is a debatable issue. However, it will come. And therefore, when the vaccine arrives, these systems should be in place. We should already know, we should have a strategy for it, a policy for it. We should know who are prioritized, who are going to get the vaccine first. We should then have our vaccine systems in place so that operationalizing that policy is easier, and we can move out and give the vaccine to the people that need to get it first. Then I think it's very important also to see that countries are cognizant of this at this stage, when they still have time to really plan ahead. I am planning to sort of alert all countries on it, because I do feel that very often in the rush to produce the vaccine, this important question of what will happen when the vaccine will come is getting overlooked. So building capacity in the countries, training our people there to see that, yes, those that are going to give the vaccine are well trained to give it, having our cold chain facilities in place, having our distribution mechanisms in place. These are some of the things that we need to look at. And I would also like to repeat what has already been said, because I feel it's extremely important. Yes, vaccine is important and we are looking at it. However, public health measures cannot be ignored. Even when the vaccine comes, public health measures will be important. That is respiratory hygiene, wearing of masks, social distancing, continuing to detect, isolate, and treat. All this has to also continue.
Okay. Well said, ma'am. We've had a very engaging conversation. We've run out of time totally. I look forward to, of course, great institutions and organizations like IMA helping us solve these problems. Our thanks, of course, to Mrs. Singhania, the current president of IMA, as well as Rekha Ji, the Secretary General, and their entire team for putting us all together. I look forward to carrying on these conversations in the mainstream media so that we can not only have the logistics, but from my professional experience, and my only ending two bits here would be, we also must have consensus as a country of what we plan to do and how we do it. If we don't have the consensus, I don't hope that we end up having very, very bitter battles over what will still be a rare resource which will have to be allocated very, very scientifically and very, very carefully. For that, consensus becomes very important. Thank you all for a fascinating conversation. And with that, I would like to invite our hosts at IMA back in, and thank you for attending this.